And of course, to be prepared for an IEP meeting, it would be helpful to have be familiar with the IEP form and understand that. And so I understand you brought an IEP form, so that, and I'll let you, because I know you know the IEP form better than I do, so I'll let you take it from here and kind of give some highlights of the form that you feel people out there should know to help them prepare for the IEP meeting.
Sure. And this can be important information for parents. This can also be important information for students as they become a more active part of the process, which I highly encourage from the get-go. This meeting is about you, and if you're not in the meeting, how do you know what teachers have set up to help you and to work with you and to support you? The meetings can be a little bit longer than you'd be comfortable with. If you need to take a break during them, I'm sure that someone would be happy to let you go ahead and go get a drink of water the same way that you do in a classroom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over very, very briefly what's on this IEP, and I do realize that it's really hard to see on the screen because I can barely see it on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference the different parts on the IEP, and then Zach and I will work together to make sure that the right parts end up on the video at the right time. The front page of the IEP is mainly personal information. This is making sure that your home address is right, making sure that the school has your correct phone number, and all of those things. There's not really a whole lot to do on the first page. The second page starts out with the future planning section, which is discussing what are we going to do, why is this IEP set, what goals are we trying to help the student towards so that in the future they're going to be successful. This is not, the IEPs aren't set up to help you get through the school day. They're set up to help you be successful in the long term, and the future planning is something that looks at that. Section 2 is special considerations, special factors. This might be something if there's a communication challenge, if you have speech class. This might be something that if there's a visual challenge, or if there's something along the lines of a behavioral challenge, or the last question asked, does the child require specially designed physical education, which might be something that you had checked off on your IEP. It's helping people to know at a quick glance, what are we looking at here? Section 3 is the profile. Section 3 is where we talk all about the student. This is the catch-all area. We're going to talk more later on about how are you struggling in math, and why don't you get to PE on time, and why are your language arts grades so low. That's not a factor so much on here. This is personal. This is, what are some things that you enjoy doing? What are some of the things during the day that really get you engaged? What are some of the things that you struggle with? Is there a particular way that you act in the classroom? Is there anything about your home life that we need to know that might help us to factor things in? Maybe you have, a baby brother at home, and maybe that baby brother keeps you up a lot at night because babies tend to cry a lot. Maybe that's an important factor for us to know. So that's what Section 3 is, and this is something that, if there's a general thing to contribute, this is where it's going to go, right into here. Sections 4 and 5, these are future planning. These are looking towards long-term employment, living on your own. These are things that some schools won't start filling in until 14. A lot of schools will start filling it in earlier too, so don't be thrown off if you see this filled in, even though it's looking at how are we going to get you a job and you're in 5th grade. We're going to start looking at those things now so that we can set you up for success in the future, and so that we can look at those things. Then we flip 2 pages. Just kidding, 3 pages. And then we get to Section 6. There's a lot of Section 6s. There's only one right here. But these are going to be the individual goals. So, Zach might have had, I hope you don't mind I keep referencing you.
No problem.
Zach probably would have had an occupational therapy goal, and possibly even a physical therapy goal, where he's working on, occupational is kind of more fine motor, and physical therapy is more gross motor. So occupational therapy is handwriting and being able to pick things up and maneuver things. Physical therapy is going to be more walking, getting from place to place, making sure that you can be safe getting from where you need to. This is also where a speech goal may go. This is also where all the academic goals may go, which is the majority of the goals that I've worked with, because I'm the intervention specialist, so I focus on the academic part. I've had my occupational therapist working on goals. I've had my my speech pathologist working on goals, and we all write our own goals and then put them into this document. So it's going to start off up top with present levels. That's going to talk about your scores, how you're doing in class, how you might have done on state assessments and any assessments that the school's done to see how you're doing. And it's going to talk about what the specific teacher sees. So if it's math, it's going to talk about what the math teacher sees. If you're missing a lot of assignments, they might talk about that, and they might try to look further into why, other than just you don't want to do it. Is there a reason why? And that might be what they're looking into.
And to give an example, since you have been referencing me, give an example of what I'm sure, I don't remember all the details because I wasn't seeing the written forms when I was a part of the IEP meetings back in the day, but one of my measurable annual goals was just that idea of making sure that in case of a fire, that I'd be, again, this is physical, but and I'm on the second floor, that I'm able to get down safely get down the steps and out to the correct, whatever the fire route is, to get out of whatever room I'm in. And so the physical therapist who worked for the school system would come in once a quarter or once every, and she'd take me out of class, and this is in high school, and I would do the stairs and basically time how fast it took me. She would make any additional notes of maybe something that she saw, and that's just an example of an annual goal that I had in my IEP.
Thank you. That's a great example of a goal. The ones that I would typically work with would be along the lines of a student is taking a test that's a specific test that measures math computation, which is how you add, subtract, multiply, divide. And maybe the student is currently at 5 on a 6th grade level, and I want to see them get up to 12 by the end of the school year. The average for the 6th grade, let's say it's a 6th grade student, the average for the 6th grade might be a 20. But this is not about what is the average for a typical 6th grader. This is about what is going to work for that student. So this goal is going to be set specifically for the individual student, which is why it's on the IEP. This is not about what's average for everybody else. This is about how do we see that student progressing. So that would be the measurable annual goal, which would be a little bit lower down on section 6, which you can totally see this paper. And then down below into the objectives, it's going to be the same goal broken down in smaller chunks. So instead of, I'm going to take a really wild guess because I'm not a physical therapist, but instead of Zach being able to get all the way out to a completely safe zone by the end of the year, it might be that he's able to get there in 10 minutes, and then he's able to get there in 9 minutes, and then he's able to get there in 8 minutes. And it's breaking it down so that we're able to see progress along the way. And if we find out that at the first, by the first objective, which is typically by quarters, if it's taking Zach 20 minutes to get out there, obviously something in the plan needs to change because there's something that's not connecting. That's when we use the progress reports, and I
was going to joke that I should stop dropping by my locker during these fire drills.
Maybe that's what needs to change in the plan. Maybe there's an extra accommodation we need to work in there, like Zach will have someone walk with him. But there's a lot of things that can be added in and made adjustments for, and that's what the annual goals are broken up into for. Goals, section 7 on the IEP is where we get to describing the services. This is where it's going to talk about how long are you going to see a teacher, what teachers are you going to see that are not the teachers that most students are typically going to see, and what are you going to be doing with them. So this is where I would put into my IEPs with math computation, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. I'm also a math teacher, so I do a lot of math references. So I would write in that maybe I'm going to work with that student for 30 minutes once a day. Or I might write in that I'm going to see that student for 2.5 hours once every week, and then that would break down to 30 minutes a day. So these can be written in differently because if the schedule changes, I still want to make sure that I get in my minutes. And as this is a legally binding document, you're going to see that the timeframes are put in so that they're still going to be attainable, even if something happens in the schedule. So for occupational therapists and speech therapists, you might see that they're going to be working with the student for 90 minutes a month. And what that's going to break down to is that's going to typically break down to 30 minutes 3 out of 4 weeks every month. So the student is getting some interaction, but it's also leaving the flexibility to make sure that they're able to get their time without having to miss as much of the core content time as possible.
And that kind of feeds into the example I gave about the stairs and the, just safety, and the goal to make sure I could be safely move out of a building in case of an emergency, where I mentioned that I either saw the physical therapist quarterly or by semester. Well, once a year. I think it was quarterly, basically, and that would have been on the 7th page as far as how, Zach will see Mickey once a quarter to measure his time and make sure he's not losing anything either, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times the schools are going to work to try to, if there's a pull-out session, which is where I take a small group of students or individual students into a one-on-one or a small group situation, the schools try their best to make sure that the students don't miss core content time, because that's very, very important. The goal of the IEP is not to make students miss content time. Sometimes due to the schedule that's going to happen, and the teachers will typically try to work with each other and make sure that they kind of shift the more important things when the student is in the room. But each school has its own schedule and its own setup. My school works with an intervention time so that everyone in the school is receiving some sort of more differentiated instruction. The students who are higher up are being pushed a little bit further, the students who are lower are being supported, and then I take my specific group and we go to a different room where the distractions are less, where we can focus on foundational things or behavioral things, or maybe it's just focusing on organization. Sometimes that's what the student struggles with, is finding a way to keep organized so that they can find their own things. And that leads on, there is a section in here about assistive technology, which might have been some of the things that people with communication issues might have written on here. It might be something where people with mobility challenges might also have something written on here.
Or in elementary school, I used a pencil grip on my pencil, and that came from an occupational therapist. So under Assistive Technology, that was something that they had on my IEP, was to get Zach to use his pencil grip, so to correct my kind of like the grip of my pencil, so I'm not getting calloused fingers and such things as I'm writing.
And down below here, not to change subject just a little bit, but this moves on to the accommodations at the very bottom. Accommodations and modifications are where changes might happen in the classroom. Changes also might happen working one-on-one or in a small group with the intervention specialist, but these are where things are more individualized towards the student. This is where most people are in the classroom are taking notes, and some students are set up with closed notes, which is the pre-typed notes with blanks in them. This is where extra prompts might be built in. This is where giving students some extra wait time so that they have some extra processing time, because not everyone thinks on the spot, and it's not fair to ask everyone to be able to give an answer immediately. And that might be where wait time is officially built in to the IEP document, and there are so many different accommodations that can be put in here. That would be an entirely different discussion. But this is where
something I want to really quickly interject, will make it quick since there is so much to go over, is you said accommodations and modifications. For someone who is unfamiliar, they might think, oh, they're synonyms kind of for each other, but there is a key difference between accommodations and modifications. I learned this while doing research for a writing client a few years ago, and that is an accommodation is going to be something that assists you to reach kind of like the same level that everyone else, the same goal everyone else is achieving, where a modification is going to modify that, and of course correct me if I'm wrong, but that modification is going to modify whatever said objective is and make it something that it's possible for the student we are discussing to achieve.
Yes. An example of accommodation, if you're given 10 spelling words, an example of an accommodation might be asking the student, instead of taking a matching test where they have to match up all 10 words to all 10 options, might be splitting it into 5 and 5. So the student only has to look at 5 words and 5 definitions at a time. They have the same words, they have the same definitions, but it's broken up in a way that's more accessible for the student. A modification would be giving the student less complex words, or giving the student fewer words, and giving them less actual content that they are looking to cover. And that could be done for a variety of reasons. But that's a tangible example of the difference between accommodation and modification. You explained it very well, though. You'll also see at the end of Section 7 is services to support medical needs. This is where students who have, this might be diabetes, this might be a variety of different things that might be said, and this could be student safety. This is where the medical needs would be accommodated as well. So there's a specific section for medical needs. Section 8 talks about transportation needs. This is a student who specifically has needs for transportation that are physical. Getting onto a school bus. Maybe the student in the wheelchair can't get up on the school bus without a very specific type of school bus, one of them with the lift instead of with the stairs, for obvious reasons. That's where Section 8 would come into play. Section 9, and we're almost to the end, I promise. Section 9 is where it discusses, and this is where it talks about if the student has the, I don't have the wording exactly memorized because of copy and paste, if the student has the same opportunities to participate in non-academic or extracurricular activities. So most students are going to have the same opportunities. Just because you have an IEP does not mean you can't participate in after-school activities. It doesn't mean you can't participate in anything. This is where it would be outlined exactly if there was a reason why that would happen. A lot of times it's going to be accommodated, though. Section 10 is the double check. And it says, the team has considered the strength of the child, the concerns of the parent, the results of testing, and it goes on, and this is where the team checks off, yes, we did think about this, yes, it was considered, and if they check no, I would go back and reconsider the IEP. Or have a really good explanation why. Section 11 discusses least restrictive environment. This is where it looks at, is the student with their peers all of the time? If the student is not with the traditional classroom, this is where it talks about why. Least restrictive environment might mean keeping the student in with all of the other students for the entire day and pushing in and providing services through accommodations. It also might mean that the least restrictive environment is removing the child from their peers for a set amount of time to be able to give them more individualized instruction, fewer distractions, something along those lines. So this is where it would be outlined why the student is being pulled out, if the student is being pulled out. And then Section 12, these are the testing accommodations that you receive on the official state tests. The tests are becoming a little bit looser in what's required to be accommodated because they're providing more accommodations that are built in. However, this section is still going to be filled out, and it's still going to be a very strong consideration. In order to receive some accommodations on state testing, especially the higher up ones, it needs to be documented on a document such as an IEP. So that this is a very important section to receive testing accommodations.
How about we move forth to Section 42? I'm just kidding, there's not that many sections.
Well, let's just hold off at Section 13 and 14, because 13 is the signatures, and 14 is that permission that I told you about, where it signs off and says that the parent agrees or disagrees with the implementation of the IEP.
thank you for that walkthrough.